tomorrow morning.
Oh, good. Where are you
Yeah.
going?
Well, actually, gonna head out to northern Arizona and
Oh,
do
nice.
a little mountain biking there, and then head back up into southwest Colorado and do a little skiing there.
Good.
Nice.
Yeah.
You could always go to Texas and try to find some skiing opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to avoid Texas.
Yeah.
Usually I do take a southern route when I head to southwest Colorado. I take a southern route through the panhandle of Texas, but I'm avoiding that like the plague. Those poor people. My goodness.
Oh, yeah. That's no fun.
I had a few too many M&Ms.
Oh, yeah, I do too.
Don't tell Patty.
Our secret.
I think we had a couple people that said they might not make. I think Jack was one, and then Emily Dubé. She let me know she wouldn't be here either. So
Right?
other than that, I think we should be all right.
I think those are the only two people that said that they couldn't make it.
Okay. Three minutes and counting. So
Oh,
hello, Beth.
how
Hi,
are you
Beth.
all?
Good. So we have Mary Catherine's here, Mark, Beth, Al.
Well, Andrew, sometime during the meeting, it may be useful to make sure that we're going to have a quorum or good attendance for the next meeting in a couple of weeks here for the master plan discussion about the
Okay,
community opinion survey.
great.
Yeah, that's on March the 4th.
I will be out of town, actually. Let me see. I'm not going to try to open my calendar now. This will disappear and I'll never get it back, but
I understand.
Disappeared through out of town.
I
Just need to
might,
take it with you.
as I say, I may be able to attend. I wasn't planning on taking a computer.
Sounds like you're going to go out and have some fun.
I will be in, I'll be in somewhere warmer.
Okay.
But,
Baltics. Right.
Yeah.
You're not going to Texas then, huh?
I'll be in the Bahamas. Yeah. So they have Wi-Fi, but it's spotty by design.
Right.
But I could throw my laptop in and see if the house we're staying in is supposed to have Wi-Fi, but I really hope it kind of doesn't, but we'll see.
Well, you do have the ability, there's an app for smartphones for Zoom. So, you know, even if you just have your phone with you, that'll work.
Okay.
I've done that for city council meetings. But obviously, if you're having too much fun or if you've had a few cocktails, I
Yes.
think we'll understand.
My presence may not be welcome. Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
it might be entertaining, Andrew.
That may be the last time. Yeah. So, well, I think we got about a minute. I see Bill's on. Nancy Rondell, Abe Swim. Okay, looks like 5:30 to me. Jeff, do you mind calling the roll, please?
Absolutely. Beth Rahali,
I'm here in Harbor Springs.
thank you. Mary Catherine Hanna. Mary Catherine, it looks like your mic might be muted.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry about that.
No problem, thank you. Bill Mulder,
Here, Harbor Springs.
Mark Bidet,
Here, Harbor Springs.
Andrew Bowman,
Here, Harbor Springs.
and Al Dyka.
Here, Harbor Springs.
That's 6, we have a quorum.
And I am also in Harbor Springs.
Oh, I'm sorry, who did I miss? Oh, I see George Pete just joined us.
Yep, and Mary Catherine was just acknowledging she's in Harbor Springs, and I think George is on the.
Yep, George Pete, Grosse Pointe,
Okay.
Michigan.
So the only people we're missing is Emily Dubay and Jack Deegan, who previously let us know they wouldn't be able to be here.
Is it about Jacob Krieber? Is he?
Oh, is Jacob
Jake.
here? I
No,
don't see
I
Jacob.
don't see Jacob.
All right.
Okay, moving on to the minutes from the February 4th meeting, if that's, it says regular meeting, but was that the, sorry, I'm not, was that the master plan meeting?
Correct.
Yeah, it just says regular meeting, but it would be the master plan meeting, so. Any comments or corrections on the minutes? None? Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Support?
Support.
So I have a motion by Bill. Who seconded that?
No, motion
Mary
by Mark.
Oh, Mark. I'm sorry, Mark.
And then, so I think Mary Catherine. Second.
Okay, we have support. Any other discussion? No? Jeff, would you mind calling the roll, please?
Al Dyka,
Yes.
Andrew Bowman,
Yes.
Mark Bidet,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
George Pete,
Yes.
Mary Catherine,
Yes.
Beth Rahali.
Yes.
Motion to pass the minutes passes.
Great. Do we have any public comment or correspondence for anything that's not on the agenda this evening?
I have not received any emails or phone calls from the public regarding anything.
Okay, and Victor, there's nobody on the YouTube or the phone?
We don't have the phone going right now. There's one person watching on YouTube, but no comments.
Moving on to new and old business. We would need a motion to open a public hearing on the administrative ordinance number 2021-1. Larry or Victor, do you want to just give a quick reminder or mention to the public for anybody who may not know what that ordinance relates to?
Yeah, I can do that really quickly here. This administrative ordinance is it's an ordinance that we put in place last year as well. It was sort of styled as a COVID-19 temporary relief from certain zoning provisions in our zoning code. Some of the general provisions, just scrolling through them really quick, include outdoor seating. It includes off-street parking to be used as the space for those premises to be used for outdoor displays of goods. It also allows for buildings to have modified sized displays of beverages, goods, products, or anything else in front of their properties. Allows for centralized curbside pickup and some other things related to consumption of alcohol off premises, as well as, I believe, if the city establishes a park or green space or public space to be allowed for consumption of alcoholic beverage, that this would allow for that. So, for example, section 7 there, it says if such a portion of a park or parks is or segregated, set aside by resolution, the zoning code shall be modified to permit establishment duly licensed as a full line or specialty restaurant to sell and deliver food and beverages. So basically, we used Marina Park Harbor Master Green Space last year as a space where restaurants and or business owners could sell food and beverages that people could consume in that green space. And I think, again, this year we're probably designating that Marina Park. So essentially, again, just to wrap up, these provisions are here on a temporary basis, as a temporary nature. And they are set to expire November 1st, 2021. They can obviously be renewed, and as with other measures that we had put temporarily in place last year, some of them were made into permanent measures, permanent zoning ordinances. So, but the main priority here is to offer some COVID-19 relief for businesses and for the public to enjoy downtown this summer. So.
Great, thank you. Anyone have any questions for Victor on that, or if anyone who wasn't here when this was done the first time, before we look at a motion to open the public hearing? Does anybody have any questions?
I have one slight potential correction.
Okay.
If you mean a public hearing duly published that was held today as the meeting, today is February 18th, not February 17th.
The third whereas in the first
Third
page.
whereas, okay.
Yep.
Good catch, thank you. Okay. Any other additional comments or corrections before we entertain a motion to open the public hearing? No? Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
I move we open a public hearing on ordinance number 2021-1.
Okay. Support?
Support.
Who do I give that to?
Mary Catherine.
Mary Catherine.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So do we have anyone virtually present from the public that would like to comment on the ordinance being considered?
You want me to do a roll call on that motion?
I'm sorry, yes, please.
All right, let's run down the list real quick. Beth Rahali,
Yes.
Mary Catherine Hanna,
Yes.
George Pete,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Mark Bidet,
Yes.
Andrew Bowman,
Yes.
and Al Dyka.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Any public comment on YouTube or however else they might be commenting? Zoom.
I see none.
Okay.
I
Going
don't think
once.
there's anyone on Zoom aside from Nancy and John.
Police Chief Kyle Knight did stop in to see me today regarding this. He just was curious what was in the language. We talked about it briefly, and when he saw that it was just a continuation of things that were done the previous summer, he indicated that he did not have any concerns. He wanted me to pass that on as he was not able to be here tonight. I think he's working the scoreboard for the basketball game tonight. So.
Okay, thank you. With no other public comment, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
I second it.
Any further discussion? Okay, Jeff, if you would call the roll vote, please.
Sure. Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Mark Bidet,
Yes.
Andrew Bowman,
Yes.
Al Dyka,
Yes.
Beth Rahali,
Yes.
Mary Catherine Hanna,
Yes.
and George Pete.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Now it's open for our discussion amongst planning commission members and city staff and Larry. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts on this? It is what we did last year, and I don't believe there've been many, if any, complaints. So any thoughts?
Nope, I'm all in favor, and I hope we think about how to incorporate some of these continuing on beyond 2021.
Great. So any other comments?
I agree.
Basically, you're looking at sending a motion of the council, city council approve the administrative ordinance 2021-1. If you're so inclined. So it's a recommendation to the city council.
Okay. And Beth, you had a comment?
I just think eating outside is the best thing for the city, regardless of COVID. I'm really excited. And I agree with Mary Catherine that it should be made possible even in healthy times.
Yeah, I like it too.
Okay.
I think this summer is going to be a lot better, and I think we're really going to see how many people embrace it, still just as a pleasant activity.
Unless there are any other comments, do we have a motion to approve the administrative ordinance recommendation to council 2021-1?
That motion.
Support?
Second.
Support.
Al or Mark, you could take your choice.
Yours, Al.
Oh, thank you.
Any other discussion? With none, if you would please call the roll.
We'll start with Mark Goudet,
Yes.
Andrew Bowman,
Yes.
Al Dyka,
Yes.
Beth Rahali,
Yes.
Mary Catherine Hanna,
Yes.
George Pete,
Yes.
and Bill Mulder.
Yes.
Recommendation or motion for recommendation passes.
Great. Moving on to discussion of sign and flag regulations. There was a memo, I believe, that Larry, I think it was put together. If you could scroll, yeah.
Yes.
Everyone had a chance to review that. Anyone have any questions? Or we want to have Larry just do a real brief summary of it? Or did everyone get a chance to read this fully?
I tried to keep it short, simple, and sweet, blended it with our current zoning regulations. And we went through a lot of provisions in a lot of different ways that communities handle this. And I just came back to the basics and found a couple of simple definitions and amended some current sections of our zoning code and just tried to keep it real simple. Jeff indicated that he thought these provisions were very enforceable. On the second page, the bottom of the first page and the second page, Jeff and I had a discussion about what about other signs like Black Lives Matter, no or yes to the dog park, or stop line 5, pipeline, those kinds of signs. We don't address those anywhere in the zoning code. And so we added an item 13 for miscellaneous sign. And we provided some provisions on those. That you could have one such sign on a property. Say that fast, 5 times real fast. As long as it doesn't exceed 2 square feet in area. So all of these metrics I have in here are up for discussion, but we needed to have a starting point somewhere. So, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Larry. Any thoughts from the members on kind of what Larry's proposed? Obviously, it's a good starting point. And I like that it's fairly concise and simple, at least as much as you can be when it's something as broad as signs and flags.
And Larry, can I clarify that this is going to be, we're also going to have a hearing on this, whatever we decide on here.
Yes,
Correct.
yes, that's exactly correct. This would have to go to public hearing to amend the zoning code. And so if we like these or modify these, we could put them in ordinance form, have it advertised, hopefully for our next meeting in March.
I have a question, Larry and
Yes.
Victor. Did you think that people would be resistant to having the number of signs decreed by the city? Do you think that might create a problem?
Well, I think when you provide a regulation that tells people that they have a limitation on something, you're always going to get a little pushback somewhere. But if you know, I think the numbers are reasonable. Some people aren't going to think that, and they're going to want, well, I should have the right to have 20 signs on my property. And okay, that's their opinion, that's fine, but I'm not sure from a city standpoint that would be a good perspective to have that number that high in there for political signs. So, you know, we had to start somewhere for this discussion, but I guess, Beth, the answer to your question is we always make some people mad when we put metrics in an ordinance.
And Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but right now, and it might help to remember that I think right now, technically none are permitted. Is that correct?
Correct. And furthermore, when we did get one or two complaints that drove us to, looking into potential language here, I did drive around to see what type of activity we had throughout the community. And predominantly, I think that the vast majority of properties within the city of Harbor Springs would be in compliance with this as it's drafted. I think we only really have maybe, between 2 to 5 properties where they would be exceeding, this, and that we would need to stop and say hi to that property owner and explain the new rules, should that be needed.
Okay.
Hey, Larry, on
Yes.
H, you're stating that 3 total signs not to exceed 6 square feet in total area. Is that considered both sides of the sign, since they're usually double-sided?
No, usually one side of the size of the sign is, if it's, 1 foot by 18 inches, you multiply that out, that is the size of the sign. We don't count sides.
Okay. And secondly, on the size, if you have an 18-inch by 24-inch sign, which I think is pretty standard political sign, that's 3 square feet for one sign.
Okay,
So maybe the 6 should really be 9 square feet for 3 signs, or limit the size of each sign or something like that. Just practically speaking, if you're gonna have 3 political signs, I think each one's gonna be about 3 square feet.
See Mark's point here is, so is that 6 square feet? I mean, each sign can be 6 square feet, or the total of all 3 signs together has to be 6 square feet?
in total area, so that's all 3 signs. Or if you can't get 3 signs to fit 6 square feet, then maybe you only get 2 signs. Or you could put 1 sign up that's 6 square feet.
I think Mark was saying that the standard size for a political sign is 3 square feet.
Yes, it is.
And maybe that number should be 9 rather than 6.
I think
That's fine. We needed, like I said, we needed to start somewhere. If we want to change that 6 to a 9, we can certainly do that.
To get us there, I think 3 signs is a good number. I mean, that would give you a chance to, if it was a multi-election year, you could have a local candidate, a national candidate, and school board or something. So 3 doesn't seem too disruptive or too, obtrusive. And but Mark is right. The standard size is 2 feet by 1.5 feet. So that's 3 feet per standard sign.
I'd just like to chime in and follow up on that then, because the way that we have this worded, they could have up to 3 signs, the total square footage not to exceed, changing the 6 to a 9. But do we want to then have a specific limiter per sign? Because the way it's worded now, someone could choose to have 1 sign that's 9 square feet. And do we want to see a sign that large?
I would not want to see a sign that large.
Maybe you maybe you do the 3 foot maximum
For
per
each
sign.
sign.
Up to 3 signs, each can be up to 3 square feet.
Bingo.
There you
Yep.
go.
And would that make sense to have that same size? Because in the number 13 on the second page, we have the miscellaneous sign. Do we want to say the same size for that one, 1 sign not to exceed 3 square feet?
I think that makes sense. I wondered about that size when I first read it. So I think they ought to match. They all are on the same stock practically. So.
Okay,
And Larry, you had mentioned that the area is only for 1 side of the sign. Do we have that already defined in our ordinance, in the zoning code, or do we need to redefine that for this section? Just so people are clear.
we have it in our zoning code.
Okay.
But I will check just to make sure of that. I'm almost positive we do.
All right, I just will double check. Thanks.
Most of our zoning code, when it comes to measuring the size of the sign, just talks about the size of the sign. The only area that I'm aware of where we specifically address a double-sided sign is we call out specifically projection signs. and state that on those situations, we do measure both sides.
Like
Okay.
in the CBD.
Yeah, within the central business district, yeah.
But then do we go back to H and state, that you're allowed up to 3 square feet per side, per sign per side? Because then it takes care of the double-sided issue.
I think, yeah, either way, if we rely on the definition, as long as that's clear, or if it's easier for somebody just to go to one spot and read that, I think that's a good idea. Any other comments on the
Well,
outline?
after all this discussion, I'm going to vote against the change because for me, it's a freedom of speech issue. And we can't write an ordinance that doesn't violate the freedom of speech in my mind. So, yeah, it's just my feelings about it.
Okay. I respect that, Alan. I think the main issue that came up is because with the couple complaints we had, we realized that right now the ordinance is silent on them, so it doesn't, by default, doesn't allow any. So
I hate
agree.
signs personally, but I think people have a right to put them up.
Well, there would be nothing that would stop someone from rotating the signs that they display, right? I mean, you could take down one sign for a week and replace it with a different sign.
You could change them daily
Yeah.
if you wanted, but you're only permitted to have 3, up to 3 square feet each.
I mean, this is Mary Catherine. Technically, right now, they are not allowed any, right?
That is correct.
Which is one way to go. So, but that certainly restricts people's freedom of speech even further to say, because we don't want to restrict anybody's freedom of speech, we are going to, in effect, restrict everybody. Is essentially the way the lay of the land is now.
And I think, Larry, does it come down to a matter of if we have something in the code that's not permitted and we allow it to, that condition to exist, is it somewhat diminishing, the code as a whole, or is that really more specific to each topic? But
It's more specific to each topic. It just opens up our liability with if somebody wanted to press the issue and take us to task on it if we just tacitly don't enforce the provision of our zoning code. We're kind of sticking out there a lot.
would that make the other sign regulations less enforceable? I remember there was an instance where it was a camper trailer was parked in a driveway and the person was cited for it. And then they went around and found other examples of campers parked in driveways. Now, theirs happened to be being inhabited and had an extension cord running to the garage, but it begged, it sort of seems somewhat similar to me that we ought to at least have a regulation that's enforceable or more, as Jeff put it, a majority of people are complying with it. And I certainly respect Al's decision not to vote no just on the principle of regulating signs at all, but I think it may be, it's an improvement from what we have right now, I think. And we may get a lot of comment from the public that 3 isn't enough, and we can certainly amend that during the public hearing. So
Yes, you could.
I think where we would get in trouble is if we were selective in our enforcement. If we had a number of instances going on throughout town that were violations of our zoning code, and we had complaints about one property, and we chose to only enforce the zoning ordinance on that property, then we would definitely be probably, sticking our necks out too far. If we took that opportunity to be, enforcing things appropriately on all properties, we would probably be okay. And that's the difference there, I think.
I'd
And
like
again,
to ask a question.
sure, Beth.
When we allowed no political signs, it was never enforced, correct?
Correct.
Obviously. So now we're making a rule, but will it be enforced? Or will it just be let go like
Well, I
it
think-
has been?
Yeah, with most of our zoning code, we are a small staff here at Harbor Springs. So with a lot of issues, it kind of comes down to situations where we rely on members of the public to bring an issue to our attention. We don't have the time to be out every day, en masse looking at every possibility for every zoning code violation. We don't have the staff time to be able to do that. So certain times of year, certain types of issues rear their head. For instance, I'll use the example of tall grass. The beginning of summer, we do typically get some complaints at that time, and I know it's coming. So I take that opportunity at the beginning of summer to go out and do an inspection on a specific day and say, where do we have this issue, most prevalent, and document every case and send out a polite letter to the property owners, letting them know. And sometimes we just have issues that aren't necessarily as prevalent, and so we take a little bit of a more lax approach to that until we receive a complaint that brings it to our attention. And at that point, then, like with political signs, like we just had, we had a complaint regarding the number of signs at one location and the size of a sign at another location. So we took that opportunity to say, let's look at all of the properties throughout Harbor Springs, drive around and see the condition of what we had going on, and then determine where we needed to send violation letters. And when we realized what our zoning code did and how it treated political signs, we realized that we didn't think it would be appropriate to go out and tell everybody within the community, you can't have any signs. So that's why we brought this here. So, but in this situation, it would be, we've received a complaint about a property. We would go out and visit that property, verify that it is an issue, and then go out and look to see if there are any other issues going on at that same time, so that when we do send that property owner a letter or contact them and knock on their door and say hello, that if they bring up and point out, well, what about this other property down the road? We can say we're addressing that situation as well, so that we're not being, particular to individuals.
Am I correct that last year, when you got the complaints, you really couldn't enforce anything because you had nothing in the zoning code?
Well, we could
Oh,
have.
they weren't allowed.
Right, he would have had
That's
to
right,
enforce
they
on most, anybody in town that had a guard sign, so.
Idea was at that time was that it was, by the time we got the complaints, it was the midst of political season and there was probably hundreds of houses with some sort of political sign, and we thought it would be absolutely inappropriate to go around telling everyone you have to take out your political signs because our zoning ordinance says no, and that it's better to be addressed by fixing that issue here in the Planning Commission. Had it only been one or two houses, then probably would have been an easier thing, but obviously political season, contentious election year.
It would have been a disaster, yes.
Any other thoughts on the draft as proposed? We also have, there are regulations in there regarding flags, not nearly as big of an issue as the political signs, but it is in there and would be part of any draft ordinance that we held a public hearing to discuss.
Larry, speaking as we move over to flags, are political flags included? I didn't see how we addressed that.
There's no, political flags are not permitted.
Okay,
If you look at the definition, top of the page, it's an official, governmental, civic, philanthropic, educational, or religious organization emblem displayed on fabric or other material generally mounted onto a pole. So if you had a political candidate that had a flag and you're flying it, that's against the rule as we've proposed it.
But doesn't paragraph G then allow the flags?
Yeah, I
No.
was confused by that.
Because it says flags as defined herein.
Okay.
Okay, so that refers you back up to the definition. Okay, shall not exceed 30 feet and only 2 flags are permitted on a flagpole.
I mean, say somebody wants to fly the Jolly Roger on a Friday afternoon. I mean, it doesn't really fit any of those categories. I'm just trying to use as random an example as I can.
Okay.
Or the little martini flags, either one of those. Is that, I mean, you can question their taste, but really is that, as the definition of a flag, is that prohibited? It seems like it would be.
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
And Larry, can you clarify for me, are flags only allowed on flagpoles? Where else would they be? I don't know. A little stick, I don't know, that's on the hanging from the house. I'm not sure how we define
Well,
flag.
4th of July, we end up actually with lots of flags on little sticks that, that people put on their property or line the street or line their driveway. So yeah, there are, we could really take this to a huge extreme about all the little nuances that we have about flags and where people and how they fly them. But Jeff really brought to us the task of flags on flagpoles. And basically he wanted to have that clarified. And so that's what we addressed here. But we can take that topic to a large, discussion about all the little areas of how flags can be flown.
Larry, is it in your research, did you find any other municipality or ordinance that basically said that, a flag of unless if a flag is for a political election, it can only be flown, so it would count towards your political sign square footage? And
I did not. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And then just basically leave the rest of the flag regulation out of it. I mean, really,
I did not find a community that had any regulations regarding political flags.
Okay.
It was a topic it's probably a newer situation that's just come about in the last few years.
Yeah.
Where we typically and historically haven't seen political types of flags.
I think you're right. You just end up getting into this minutia of defining, whether it's a Jolly Roger or whatever. I mean, any flag that might just be for entertainment value, it's not a political statement, and you end up not being able to fly it. Seems sort of, I don't know, over the top to me. But is it enough to sort of regulate?
Well, it would be
affiliated with a political race, and then it falls under the same, into your square footage of your yard signs. And if you want to go with a flag instead of a sign, they're all temporary in nature. Something on a flagpole is probably more permanent.
Well, you could take on the second page here, miscellaneous sign, a flag like that could be considered a sign. Any sign not specifically defined or regulated by the zoning code may be permitted, provided there's no more than one, and it doesn't exceed 3 square feet in area.
And just let that be
that would be the overriding rule for those kind of situations.
Does that make more sense to everybody?
Because when we look at the definition of sign, that is such a broad definition in our zoning code, like you find in most zoning regulations. It covers anything that has any type of a message on it at all that's displayed.
Larry, did you consider whether or not, because I saw if we're going to count a miscellaneous sign as potentially a flag as a miscellaneous sign, did we put any thought into whether or not we should have a size limit for a flag, or is that just something we should stay away from?
I didn't. I stayed away from it because I've written ordinances like that before, and it gets a little sticky sometimes. Most people generally display, a 4x6 or a 3x5 flag is what I generally find in residential commercial areas. Every once in a while, you'll find somebody that wants to display a big 10x12 or larger American flag out there that, and they need an oversized pole to do that, to hold it up there. So they're quite large.
And the reason I was getting at that, because if someone's going to display Jolly whatever flag that Andy was talking about there,
yep.
if it only can be 3 square feet, that's relatively small for a flag, I would assume. If we use the miscellaneous sign definition for a flag. That extra third flag.
It would be. So if they have something up there larger, Jeff would have to issue a citation, or ask them to take it down.
And I guess the issue with them getting bigger is that that's really it's noise, it's shadow, usually, like you say, you do have to get if you put too big of a flag up there, you're not gonna have a flagpole for very long, but.
Well, they make some good sized flagpoles at Holden though.
I was just trying to think of a way to sort of simplify getting into, again, sort of to Al's point of regulating what messages people want to display on their flagpole or their yard. Is there a way just to have them fall under that miscellaneous category, and not really get into defining what flags are and aren't permitted? But it is a tough one to figure out.
Yeah, remember, we cannot regulate the message.
Right.
We can only regulate the size of the display instrument.
And I guess the flag definition in a way feels a little close to me to defining, by omission, you're sort of defining message in a sense. Because if it's not one of those categories, it's technically not allowed, I guess.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my concern, Mary Catherine, is that by your comment here makes it clear that we have brought the issue up, and that therefore we are going to allow philanthropic speech or educational speech, but not, and I suppose you could argue that any one of these are philanthropic or educational or religious, but that you're going to allow me to have speech around a philanthropic concern, but not about whether or not I want the dog park in Harbor Springs. Like that feels like we are edging into regulating speech territory.
I think
no, we're allowing the dog or no dog park sign. It just falls under miscellaneous.
But not a flag. Like,
right.
I might want to have a pro dog park flag. We say you can't.
How do people feel? I mean, I kind of like what came up about the idea of, a flag, if it's outside the definition of what's, it falls under the miscellaneous sign, and maybe there's a way to just, say miscellaneous signs and flags and just call it out like that, and let it be, that be the end of it. So.
Or the other option is to redefine flag as just any fabric or material generally mounted to a pole, and limit it to 2 flags per pole, and then don't worry about what's on the flag.
Well, the difficulty there then is if you create that ability, you have now permitted commercial signs on flags within the central business district. So you got to be careful of the unintended consequences of what you're also allowing to go on when you make these changes to what is going to be allowed on a flag. Right. And we don't want to create a situation where we accidentally permit a business to have a big flag that says sale, 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 open today, that's flapping around, because that would change the nature of our community. I feel, and I think that a lot of people would agree.
Yeah.
So we just have to be careful, cognizant of the potential, changes of not necessarily what we would like to see, but seeing what someone else that might take us to task on it and what it's really permitting somebody to do.
And Larry, is this something we can add just into the residential districts? Is that in the central business district has quite a bit of sign ordinance already, and we wouldn't be impacting those, or is this citywide at this point?
Well, these are citywide regulations, the way they're proposed. Basically, we're just putting them under the exemptions, sections of the zoning code.
Is there a way to work in language that excludes commercial, for advertisement, or give something to the city staff that is enforceable in terms of clearly defining something not as a freedom of speech, but as a commercial operation?
Ask a question, please. Is there a way to just include political flags? Why don't we want political flags flown? If you can have political signs,
We had a lot of them this election. And then the same thing in my mind goes to the university flags. You know, it just seems like people like to fly the flags of their favorite schools on game day. And I sure don't see anything wrong with that. And
No. I don't either.
don't really want to regulate that or condemn it.
You know,
And actually,
Isn't
That's
that where this started, Jeff?
yes, that's precisely where this started, is right now, as it stands, educational organizations are not permitted on flagpoles. The language that we have in our code right now states that we permit the United States flag, the state of Michigan flag, and any other flags that are approved by council. And my initial question was, when does council approve types of flags or a specific flag at a specific location? And that kind of started this whole discussion because we had a complaint regarding a university flag on a flagpole. And technically it's not permitted, but realistically, I realized that that happens, especially on game days. You know, you see U of M flags, MSU flags, you know, all over town, or just the various flag for a university that somebody attended college at.
Right.
And I
think
didn't
that's
think
totally appropriate.
Yeah, I do too. I think we all probably feel that way and just didn't, and Jeff did a good job of bringing it to everybody's attention that you know, who would have thought it's not permitted? Who would have thought that political signs weren't permitted, yard signs weren't permitted? But Larry, is there a way to keep the definition of flag very broad, but exclude commercial advertising, you know, as Jeff pointed out, could very well happen. So, oh, did we lose Larry?
Or can we do it through?
No, I'm just thinking about
Yeah.
how you would best do that.
Is it better to separate, you know, have the central business district regulations be different from residential? I mean, that maybe
Because
that.
we usually try to write the zoning regulation in a positive fashion. This is what you can do.
Yeah.
And not what you can't do. And so that's why it's written the way it is. Because it's positive. This is what's permissible. And if it's not written there, then you can't do it. That's the way the whole zoning code is written.
Okay.
It's the foundation of it's a positive ordinance, as opposed to this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. So is that a total list of everything you can't do? What if it's not listed, so could I put a piggery in my backyard? It's not listed as something I can't do.
Right.
And so they gave up that style of zoning back in the late 60s, early 70s, of writing zoning codes, zoning ordinances that had both positive and negative aspects to it. Because there's always something that you leave out that somebody thinks about that, oh, so I could put a piggery here behind my house. Right. Well, no, we don't want that. So they're all written now in a positive format.
Yeah, and maybe Mary Catherine's point is, you know, really you could make the argument that a Jolly Roger is educational and fly that flag, and I don't, you know, I guess I'm getting more, because this is for Central Business District also, which I sort of forgot. I think maybe keeping the definition of the flag in there and being as broad as we can, and that's pretty broad what we have.
So maybe adding the word political and other items to that definition, as mentioned earlier by someone.
Yeah,
the flag includes political flags.
Yeah, I mean, governmental, that might cover it. You know, that's a broad enough. And I you know, it is interesting that the political flags are a new thing, and they probably won't go. You know, it's probably not the last we've seen of them, I would guess. But
you know what? If you know, I'm reflecting on Al's comment, that's the one that, you know, has troubled all of us. And I think we're taking the right approach on signs, where we don't say what kind of sign you can have, but we just say how big it is and what your total is.
How many, right?
How many, right? So I think that's defensible, and I think it's a good blend between allowing speech and, you know, curtailing blight. And I think we ought to take the same approach on flags. I don't think we ought to say what kind of flags you can have. I think we ought to just define the, you know, the size and the number, and we'll have to roll with it. If we have to wall it off from the central business district or from commercial use, think we ought to do that, but then I think the whole thing is really defensible. And it really makes sense and it isn't overly prescriptive.
Well, Bill, we do define our political sign, and we do define it as used in connection with local government, school, district, county, or whatever election. So we do regulate the type of sign in a way by saying this is a definition of political sign. So, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it is similar. We are regulating trying to achieve a certain objective. And if we are too loose, as Jeff mentioned, we open ourselves up to people advertising on their properties, which may or may not be, something we want. But if we go too tight in our definition, then we potentially end up restricting people. So it's a difficult balance to walk. And I guess the real objective here is, what are people currently doing? And do we want to make our zoning ordinance to encompass what's currently going on and not allow anything in excess of what's currently or the mode? Or do we want to allow every possible situation to happen? Or do we want to restrict what's going on more so than we already restricted? So, I mean, I think that's a real question. And really, we're doing this because we didn't want to make everyone take away their flags and their signs that they already had up. But we also don't want to let people put up 20 flags, and we don't want to have sales signs all over people's residential homes. So what is that balance? And that's, I mean, it's a good discussion that you guys are having. I just, we have to keep in mind that there's both sides and it's hard to walk that line.
Would it be kind of to Bill's point, under G, if we did add a dimension to the flag itself, I mean, that's one thing we could add, regardless of whether we keep the definition of flag the way it is or amend it further. But we are very careful to regulate the size of every sign in town in every district, and then to leave a flag unregulated, that could be a mistake, I think.
But there must be standard sizes. Al gave them, didn't you, about American flags? How big
Aren't they 3 feet by 5 feet?
Yeah.
I believe they are.
Yeah, they're 3 by 5 or 4 by 6 are the two standards that you generally see. Most of the time you see a 3 by 5.
And I think most flags, most people are going to be interested in flying probably are similar. So if that's a
Yes.
standard we added, that would at least, eliminate some of the challenges if it's, a huge flag and it's noisy and it's casting a shadow on or flicker or whatever they call it with the windmills on somebody's yard. But I think that's a reasonable thing to consider. And I'm sort of backtracking a little on the idea of totally eliminating, as Larry pointed out and Jeff pointed out, what's permissible on a flag. I do think those are some pretty broad definitions that are in there, and I don't think would be highly restrictive against behavior that we see going on in town as a general practice. So I'm okay with the flag definition the way it is after hearing the comments.
Can we limit to have a maximum size of flag of 24 square feet, 4 by 6? So say that's the biggest one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That number. And the other thing we say that the flag pole cannot exceed 30 feet, which I think is very appropriate. Do we want to say anything there that it has, or do we say somewhere else in the zoning code that it has to be structurally or properly engineered so it doesn't fall over in somebody else's property and hit somebody or or damage other people's property? Because somebody puts it 10 feet from a property line and falls over 20 feet into somebody else's yard. Do we have anything in there or not to be concerned with it?
What we've done in the past regarding quote unquote, let's say miscellaneous structures, because we can't define every structure that somebody would put in their yard. We don't address playground equipment as an example of various things. What we've typically done is stated that they need to meet either the principal building or accessory building requirements as far as setbacks from property lines and height. And that's, what we've done for generic structures. A couple of times we have had a specific structure become more popular. As an example, a couple of years ago, the popular thing to do was the mini libraries that people were placing near sidewalks. And as that became more popular and was getting more traction, we started seeing a lot of them. We then came to Planning Commission at that time and said, do we want to continue to apply these standard regulations that we apply to kind of in generic everything, or do we want to come up with specific language for them? So if we wanted to apply something specific to flagpoles that we don't apply to generic structures on a property, then we could certainly do that.
Well, my only concern is with this type of structure, it can, unless you say it has to be 30 feet from any property line, it can actually fall and damage somebody else's property. That's my only concern. And people,
enough to say, I don't know if there is.
people will just throw stuff up and not think about it. And one will fall over with a 4x6 flag and a 40-mile-an-hour wind. There's a lot of force up there.
And maybe that's why we should take it down to a 15-square-foot flag, a 3x5, which is more of a standard. And that certainly reduces that exposure. I mean, they basically take cell towers, which are structurally engineered to face hurricane-type winds, and make those, if it's 1,000 feet tall, it has to be 1,000 feet from a property line so it doesn't damage somebody else's property.
Yeah, well, that's an Emmett County zoning right now. If you put up any type
Oh,
of
yeah.
structure like that, it's I think it's in everybody's zoning code.
That's how they most work. I've never seen somebody with a flagpole situation that has to present engineering plans that the flagpole won't fall over and it has, can take 100-mile-an-hour winds.
Would it
I
be
guess I've
enough?
never seen that happen.
So you're saying the county standard right now is it has to be whatever height, so 30 feet, it has to be 30 feet from any lot line, or if you have a shorter flagpole, it can be closer.
Well, that's
they have that
for
now for
communication towers.
But they have that now for like windmills and things like that. They have that written in such a way so that if it falls over, it can't damage somebody else's property. And on the Emmett County ZBA, of which I'm on, we had the Bell Tire issue. They wanted this huge monster flagpole, and they were required to bring in engineer drawings for how this thing was going to be anchored and all that kind of stuff. We didn't let them go with the big monster pole, but even just the one they put in, it did have engineered drawings for it.
Mark, I think you make a good point. My one concern is that, where does this lead to? For example, you plant a tree that's going to grow to be 60 feet tall, that's 5 feet from someone's property line, and that fall, I know this is a structure, a man-made structure, but essentially it's the same thing. You have a massive tree that's much bigger than a flagpole and you plant it on 5 feet away. Do we want to regulate that as well? I mean, so it could open up the door for everything else that gets kind of erected.
I have a question for Jeff. Jeff, right now, if somebody's going to put a flagpole in their yard, does that fall under a miscellaneous structure, and do they need to come and get any kind of permit from you at this point?
I guess to this point, I don't believe that I've required it. You might be able to make the point that it should be a requirement, but I certainly would not want to be bogged down with requiring a zoning permit application for every flagpole that somebody wanted to put up. Not that I think people are putting new ones up very frequently, but
I guess for the sake of getting something in ordinance form and getting public input, because I think we've come up with a fairly good starting point and then a good discussion tonight. I think that maybe just regulating the size of the flag at 3x5 or something like that isn't going to necessarily require engineered drawings. At some point, there's the liability that somebody incurs when they do put up a shoddy flagpole should come into play. But
the one good point that Mark did make, and again, I don't know if it's something that we want to consider, is do we want to have a separate setback for something like a flagpole because it's so much higher than typical other structures that fall within the property. Like a little free library is a small structure. That you could put it 5 feet away. It's not going to land on. Do we want to have a separate setback just for flagpoles, just to give us a little bit leeway? I don't know. That's something that we might want to consider.
I mean, 30 feet from any lot line sounds pretty simple, but when you start drawing that out, is that going to make some front yards, preclude them from having one at all? It doesn't seem like it would, but it might.
Any 60-foot lot would have a
Yeah.
major problem doing it.
Yeah, and on those 55-foot lots on Third Street.
Yeah.
It's real difficult.
I just
Yeah,
think it's
very
tough
hard.
to do. I
What
don't
if,
want-
what
I
if
think
you
it's
set the
enough.
setback standard at half the height of the pole?
That's,
So if you put up a 20-foot pole, it had to be 10 feet back from property line. If you put up a 30-foot pole, which is the max, you got to be 15 feet from the property line. So you have a
Side
choice.
yard. Yeah,
good idea.
those are close to in line with what a lot of the zoning district setbacks are. Side yard setbacks are anyway. Well, any more thoughts on that we want to direct Larry to? Do we need to see one more draft in this form, or do we want to try to move it to ordinance form for March? I'm good either way. Just looking for input.
I think we could see it in ordinance form.
Okay.
React from that. But why don't we review the direction that we're giving Larry then on some of the key points, so he's not spinning his wheels trying to remember
Right.
what we decided. So
This is what I have right now.
Okay, go ahead.
On item G, which is flags, we have modified that to be that the second line, not to exceed 30 feet and only 2 flags, not to exceed 15 square feet each in area are permitted on a flagpole. So we've added the idea of 15 square feet each there for a size. And then in the last sentence, only 1 flagpole shall be permitted per property and shall be set back a minimum of 1/2 the height of the flagpole. Under H, sign political, a total of 3 political signs not to exceed up to 3 square feet each in area as defined herein and shall be exempt, and so on and so forth. And then the other change is found on miscellaneous sign, item 13 on the second page. The last line, the sign does not exceed 3 square feet in area. Those are the changes that I have heard that you would like to see put into this.
Was there an addition to the flag definition for, wait till Victor gets there. Philanthropic, educational, religious, organizational. So it doesn't say political right now.
That is correct.
Yeah.
I heard we had a lot of discussion on that point, but I didn't hear a consensus of what you wanted to do.
Good, that's why we ought to get you a consensus.
I guess official governmental in my mind, maybe official eliminates it, but it's certainly, an election certainly would be, in my mind, a governmental topic. I guess somebody could make the argument under that, and I'm almost fine just leaving it at that unless people feel strongly to add political.
I think if we want to be as safe as possible from any kind of potential challenge, that we should include political. Just because it's political is a First Amendment, one of the, a speech, one of the most protected speeches out there.
Okay.
And that's just from my law background, but I think it should be included.
I do think we should be careful because political flags was one of the complaints that we received.
And at least now they'd be regulated in size and number. So is everybody comfortable adding political under the definition of flag?
Yes.
I am. If anyone objects, we can talk about that, but. Okay.
Governmental, civic, philanthropic, educational, political,
Larry,
or
would you-
religious organization emblem displayed on fabric. Okay?
Okay. Is everybody able to hear Larry okay on that? Yeah. So
This is, if we hold a public hearing on this next month, in March, you will also have the opportunity to see this again, and it doesn't preclude you from making any further adjustments to the ordinance.
Good point. So is everybody comfortable setting this in ordinance form and then moving it to a public hearing in March?
Yes.
And Victor or Jeff, should we do it? Would you need a motion to do that, or are we okay? It was just a discussion item, so.
Do we need a motion to schedule a public hearing, or we just need a consensus of?
Well, we usually do a motion to set this for public hearing for the next meeting or when we get it ready.
Do we have a motion to that effect?
I just had a thought. I'm wondering if we ought to just see it in ordinance form next time and let us, think on it over the next month. Al raised a, huge point. And maybe we don't rush the public hearing. Maybe we take a look at it one more time and really soak on it and make sure that we're confident that we want to take this to the public.
I agree with Bill.
That's
What
fine.
Al said resonated with me as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. And in that case, we probably just need to give direction to Larry to put this in ordinance form. I don't know that we would necessarily need a motion unless people feel we do.
Well, what I'll do is just amend this memo that I have for you. Mr. Raymer has the privilege of putting his legal expertise into what we do into legal form. So I'll get this out to Jeff probably in the next couple of days, and then he can distribute it so you guys can give it a lot of thought over the next 30 days.
But Jeff, can we advance it to ordinance format?
It gets more expensive.
Pardon me?
I think it gets more expensive. But I think because if we think we're going to make significant changes, I'm just guessing it's more efficient probably to have Larry draft it as close as we can and not have the expensive whereas is.
Sure.
And then add those when we're closer to have made up our minds, at least what we think makes sense. Is that accurate, Victor or Jeff?
Honestly, based on this conversation, does not look like there'll be many changes. I mean, there might be one or two. There might be just the idea that we don't want to do it at all. I mean, there's Al kind of expressed his opinion of voting no on it. But aside from that, I don't think we'd have to go to Jim Raymer either way. And if we're confident that we are going to put up an ordinance, then I would say, yes, let's go to Jim now. But if we're not confident we're going to do an ordinance at all, then I would say, let's hold off. But it seems the most people so far from what I heard want to go forward with some sort of ordinance. So I have no problem going with Jim Raymer just to get an ordinance form.
And maybe if you amend your memo with our comments from tonight, and then we do just see it with all the whereases in March.
That's fine.
And then we could entertain a motion at that time to either leave it as is or send it up for a public hearing. Does that work?
I also would think that Jim Raymer would provide us perhaps address Al's concern about how far can we go? Should we even go down this path? Some of that feedback might be pretty valuable right now.
Good point.
Yeah.
Okay. Is everybody happy with that approach?
Yes.
Okay. And do we need a motion, or is that just direction, just a request, really?
I think that direction is fine.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. Any other closing thoughts on flags and signs?
I don't know what Jolly Roger is. That's my only comment.
It's the skull and crossbones.
It's a candy.
Yes.
All right.
It's the skull and crossbones for celebrating Friday. Yeah.
I'm gonna get one of those flags. Good thing I'm in Little Traverse.
At City Hall. So, moving on, member comments. We did have I did want to just ask about attendance for the special meeting on March 4th. If everybody knows their schedule, I'm unfortunately going to be out of town. I may or may not be able to log in virtually. So
I'm still out of town on March 4th, and I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to be and what kind of Wi-Fi I'm going to have. So I can only say I'm a maybe.
I'll be here.
I'm a yes.
I'll be here.
I'll be out of town, but I'll have Wi-Fi. It won't be a problem.
So it looks like we got at least 4 saying yes. So let's keep it on. And if we get any feedback from anyone closer to the meeting that they can't make it, then we'll just have to push it off or reschedule it.
If we did have to push it off, maybe we could for whatever it's worth, I'll be back on March 10th, unless I get really lucky and get a false positive and I'm not allowed back in the country. I'm holding out hope, but so that if we needed to move it, I'm all for moving it if we think we get better attendance, but you know, we may lose 2 different people. So however you guys want to do it, it's fine by me. So any other member comments or concerns?
I have one comment as a non-member, but as a staff person here. We have not heard yet about whether in-person meetings are going to be allowed. We do have the Zoom or remote meetings is still allowed through the end of March, but we don't know when they're going to open up for in-person meetings. So I will let everyone know. I'll let Jeff know once we do hear back. But so far, let's count on our meetings still being remote until you hear further from us.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Good to know. Anyone else? No?
Good discussion tonight.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Great. Well, I would say with that, we could be adjourned. So,
Perfect.
All right.
Stay warm, stay
everyone.
safe.
all right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.